My story begins when my son Toby was born 13 years ago. He was my Toby, and I thought, this is the strangest baby ever. He's not like any of his nieces and nephews. I can't put him down without him screaming. I can't do anything because he's always needing me. This was from birth. And he was a very difficult baby. People would say to me, babies are difficult. And I was saying to myself, some babies sleep in the day. And I knew that there was something not quite right about this gorgeous little chap. At 3 months old, he could wriggle across the floor on his back. At 8 months old, he would walk for 2 hours a day. He was always on the go. By 18 months old, he would walk from 9 till 5. So we spent our entire lives outside. So he received a verbal education from me because he simply wasn't interested in anything that was going on indoors. So when you walk, you talk, you observe the seasons. So he knew all about the weather and the seasons and the harvest and spring and things coming up and things dying off. And he knew about the stars and the planets and the sun. All he wanted to do was know about his environment. And everyone said to me, you've got a genius there. You wait till he starts school. He's going to be amazing. And he started school and it was a disaster. He had no classroom skills. He couldn't sit, he couldn't do, there was nothing that he could do in the classroom, zero functioning. And the teachers thought that he was severely not capable of being in a classroom, and they wanted us to put him on drugs, and I said no. So we saw an educational psychologist who diagnosed severe dyslexia, and we saw a paediatrician who diagnosed possible social communication disorder. Now, I didn't know what that was, so I did what we do. I Googled, and I discovered the most amazing woman in America who had been helping children with learning issues for over 40 years. So I contacted her, and she told me what to do to help my son. So I helped him. Within a week, he could track. Tracking is when you keep your head still and you can follow a moving object. He hadn't been able to do that before. Within 3 weeks, he had gained 3D vision. So before that, he had no depth perception, which meant that his eyes weren't working together. So he couldn't really tell how far away anything was. Now, just those two things, not being able to track and not having 3D vision, will pretty much collapse your classroom skills. If you can't track, you can't copy from a board and write down here. If you can't track, you can't add a column of figures. If you can't track, you can't catch a ball. You can't read along a line of text. So dyslexia, it turned out, part of the symptoms anyway, was functional. This is about muscles and nerves. This isn't about intelligence. So my teacher, Svea, in America, taught me what to do to help him, as I said. Now, what happened next, I didn't expect. My phone began ringing. Now, the behavioural changes in my son were amazing. Before we did the programme with him, if we were out in a public space anywhere, he would cling on to me. Mummy, Mummy, don't talk to anyone else. Get me out of here. I don't like it. Please get me out of here. He was very, very clingy. As soon as his tracking was sorted out, that changed. That literally happened in 3 days. So other parents started noticing what it was with Toby. Suddenly he could interact with other people. So my phone began ringing. I think a few weeks after I even found the programme, I had 3 phone calls from women in Suffolk saying, 3 people have told me about you. And I asked, well, who? And they said names of people I'd never heard of, which was mind-blowing. And they were saying, whatever you did with your son, help us. So I said, well, I can't turn you away. If you want to come, come. But I don't really know what I'm doing yet. So these families would come, and I would repeat what I did with my son. And also, I would be speaking to Svea. This has happened, I've got a child with this symptom. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And I spent the next year learning, input, how to sort out these amazing children who had functional problems with their nerves. So I realised after about a year that I'd built an accidental practice. It was amazing. So I was learning and learning and learning and learning and learning. And I learned that the brain is plastic. The things that cause problems like dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, Asperger's, ADHD, autism, mutism, and a whole load more things, These are largely, although not just, sensory distortions. So the vision is really, really key. If your tracking's not working, if your eyes are not working together, so we test that by how well you can find an object in space. If your pupils are too big, there'll be too much light going in, and then you will suffer from smoke blindness and dazzle and glare. Now, they say with autistic children, they paint the page black, therefore they are disturbed. I don't agree. I think if you're really smart and you've got too much light entering your eyes, what do? You paint the page black because there's comfort there. It doesn't hurt so much. Do you see? It's just about understanding the symptoms. It's not about judgment. We can get things very, very wrong. So, the brain is plastic. There's loads and loads of research on that. And that is what I sought out in the children who've got learning issues. We correct their sensory distortions and make them happier, because if you're suffering from some of these symptoms, it's really not very comfortable. And all you do, the brain learns through movement. Do you remember those Romanian orphans who were strapped to their cots?
Yes,
do you remember
that?
They're about 10 years old and they were like newborns. Now, that's a really good illustration of how important movement is. Movement is healing. Movement creates what we need to keep our brain and our body healthy. Whilst the brain isn't made of muscles, the brain responds to the body, because the brain only knows what's going on because the body tells it. So if the information going into the brain isn't as it should be, then you will have a sensory distortion and you will not be able to interpret your environment as you should be. So neurotypical development always occurs the same way. So if this point here is conception, and then we have birth here, and then we have the first year of life there, neurotypical people will follow a particular pattern. They will do all the same movements in utero, they will be able to push themselves out when they're born, and then after they're born they will do certain movements, like, lifting their head, pushing themselves up, rolling over, if you've seen this, crawling backwards, crawling forwards. All of that is neurotypical development. Now, in our individuals who have learning issues, there has been a break at somewhere along that line from neurotypical development, and so you get sensory distortions. So it follows that if you repeat the neurotypical development, then the senses will correct and the problems will go. Now, my son was diagnosed with very severe dyslexia at 6, and he now has no learning issues at all. He's not great with time, but apart from that, there's nothing left. Now, my father was a dyslexia teacher, and when my son was diagnosed, he said to me, "Sue, there's no cure, you have to learn to live with it." But that's a belief system, and that's the one that I challenged by finding Svea in America and her teaching me what to do. So I didn't take on board that belief system. I found my own way. I helped my son. I've changed my life, and I've changed now the lives of many other people. Remember that accidental practice that I built? That's now 5 years old. And just over a year ago, I started it as a business. So I'm now training other people to do what I do. But you want to know about the science, don't you? I can tell. You want to know about, what is this funny thing you do with movement? How do you know what's going on? Well, if you look at the science, Rita Levi-Montalcini won a Nobel Prize in 1986 for her work with nerve growth factors. Nerve growth factors was the missing link between, this funny movement thing, it really makes changes in the brain. And, well, we know that moving children does something, but we don't know what. Nerve growth factors connected that. This is why moving heals the brain, or moving creates changes in the brain. Nerve growth factors are fired every time you do something new or hear something new. Now, do you remember learning to drive? First of all, it's too hard, isn't it? All those things going on up there, all these things going on here, different things to do with your feet. And you practice and you practice and you practice, and then one day it's automatic. That process of to automatic is installing new nerve pathways. And that's what we're doing when we're correcting problems with the senses, sensory distortions. So nerve growth factors are a really big thing, and we all have them every day of our lives. That's how my teacher Svea was able to regain her vision doing one of her exercises in her 80s. While you're alive, your brain is plastic and you can make things happen, you can make changes. Now, in the Salk Institute in Switzerland, they severed rat spines and they applied nerve growth factors either side of the sever, and the rats regained 30% of their movement just with 2 or 3 nerve growth factors. That's mind-blowing, isn't it? Absolutely mind-blowing. There have been tests done on the programs I use, and they have shown to benefit children with their learning issues. But I've also been doing some research of my own. The first one, I was pondering one day, neurotransmitters. Now, neurotransmitters are self-regulating, and they've known for a long time that people with ADHD have a deficiency in dopamine, and people with, say, OCD have a deficiency in serotonin. So what do? They give these neurotransmitters, but it doesn't help. And I was pondering this. I was thinking, okay, so neurotransmitters are self-regulating. They give them and they don't help. What's the missing link? And I was thinking, well, it must be that there are not enough nerves connecting them together. So when we do a neurodevelopment program, we're creating new nerve pathways, the neurotransmitters automatically balance. So that's kind of another interesting point to ponder, isn't it, too, about creating the right levels of things in the brain for the brain to function properly. And the other thing I came up with was this. So we have these children who maybe can just about read something, but then they can't remember what they've read. Do you know about that with learning issues? So I was pondering that the other day, and I came up with an idea for that too, which I think is fairly sensible. Certain other therapies like NLP know that when we remember things, or when we think about things, or when we imagine things, we move our eyes. So I can get you all to do this as an experiment now, just with yourself. Now I want you to just go back to your earliest memory, and I'm going to choose someone to look at. Go back to your earliest memory. Right, so Ruth has just looked over there. So if you can't track over there, you're not going to be able to access your memory. And now imagine something. Imagine the most amazing birthday cake you can possibly imagine. So Ruth has looked up, and that's where she accesses her imagination. So if you're a child, if you're a school child and you can't actually track, then you won't be able to access your memory. Now this is quite interesting. I'm not sure that anyone else has come up with that as a concept applied to learning issues. So this then makes what I'm doing completely groundbreaking on many levels. Aside from the fact that there are not many people in the world doing neurodevelopment, quite a lot of the stuff I'm doing is groundbreaking, cutting edge, and I find that really exciting. So nowadays, I'm still seeing patients on a one-to-one, which I love, and I'm completely convinced it's the best job in the world. And I'm also training people to do neurodevelopment because A, there's one child in every classroom at least who's got learning issues that I can't get to because they're too far away, and B, we need more people doing this so that we can help more people. So I'm now training other people, I'm doing my one-to-ones, I've written 6 books on the subject, and there will be more. So I'm just going all out to help people as best I can, and I'm developing new products all the time. My training courses are very, very inspiring. You're not going to see this kind of thing anywhere else, and that's just such a lovely thing. Do you want me to stop there?
If you wish, yes.
That's okay. Quite short and sweet, isn't it?
Okay.
For me, I mean, that's 15 minutes. I can talk for 2 hours. I gave a speech last week for 2 hours. I can continue on about any of those areas of detail if you want me to go on. Or is that enough?
One question.
Yeah.
Question.
All right.
Yes, of course.
I came across a boy, bottle set. Nobody else could read very well, and they always said he can read. And he actually stood there, he could read Shakespeare, he could read anything you put in front of him with all the inflections. He looked absolutely brilliant with his reading. And you say to him, what have you just read? And he hadn't a clue. The rest of the children in the class who were supposed to be less able than he was, who had short-term memory losses and all this kind of thing, they would come up with all these various answers, looking up, as you say, and then say, and come up with some answer. He couldn't answer.
There will be several reasons why something like that would happen.
He was brilliant.
One of them is when the hemispheres aren't talking to each other enough. We have 2 hemispheres, and they're joined together by a bundle of nerve fibres called the corpus callosum. And if those nerve fibres aren't sufficient to cope with the traffic, say there's a country lane there where there should be an 8-lane motorway, then information will not be able to change sides. For example, to add 2 numbers, that information changes hemisphere 9 times. So you can imagine if there's a deficiency in the communication between the hemispheres, then that information drops off a cliff, and then you are not going to have recall. So that's going to go for reading, that's going to go for facts. If you read something and there's not enough communication, the information is going to get lost. If you have issues with your eye tracking, the information is going to get lost. Furthermore, there's another reason too. There's so many reasons why you can have an issue with retention and with expression and with remembering to do with the senses in the brain and the processing. One thing I do when I get children to come and see me is I get them to read with both eyes, then I cover an eye, get them to read, cover the other eye, get them to read, and there's often a massive disparity between how they read with one eye, both eye, and all sorts of things. So you never know what someone's coming through the door. Many of you who run your own practice know that. I suppose it goes for any client anyway, but patient comes through the door, you have no idea what they're bringing with them, and you have to be prepared to treat the person for the first time because you've never seen a case before. Everyone is individual, and so I learn from everyone I see, and that makes me a better practitioner so that I can treat people better and do the best job I can.
Have you considered what's happening with dementia? If you're building now then with the young, with the old,
Yes.
was it physical deterioration? How can you avoid that?
Right, there's several things you can do, but before I get into the several things, I'm going to say this. My father has ADHD and he's 81, and he's had real problems with his joints, so he's not been moving. So this is a little ADHD guy sitting down a lot. Now, what happens in the brain when you don't move, remember those Romanian orphans, nerve cells get curled. It's called apoptosis. So you don't move, it's like your muscles. If you don't move the muscle, it deteriorates. The same goes for nerves in your brain. So my dad, he's been sitting around too much, so the bits of brain that are dealing with his balance are not working efficiently, and so he's walking around on a stick like this, and tiny, tiny steps. So me and one of my colleagues who's been working on his body, I've been working on his brain, and I've had him doing things that move his head, like that, because that's going to work on your balance and your vision. I've had him doing all sorts of things, and now he can walk across the room like this. That was in a month. So you can restore the brain. It's really exciting. And that's another program I've developed called Neuroflow, which is about maintaining your vision and balance and your mental and physical faculties into later life, because use it or lose it. If you're not moving, things are going to get cold. So we've also developed a program to maintain and to increase your mental and physical factors, your joints, your joint mobility, your flexibility, and what's going on in your brain, so that we can age elegantly and healthfully. I just think that's a joy.
I'll still try.
Fantastic engagement.